A note to listeners. The following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Do you think Bittaker was autistic, or is his behavior due to lack of socialization as a child? Do you think he's on the spectrum, or he was on the spectrum?
I don't think he was on the spectrum. He was socially awkward at times, but I wouldn't place him on the spectrum. You know, I've been asked a lot to look into if there is a correlation between, being autistic and some of these serial killers. It's something I do want to explore later down the line, but as far for Bittaker, no. They actually joined the Church of Scientology to hunt this girl.
Oh my God.
And then they offered the Church of Scientology, they said they do security, they can put some cameras in. They were trying to put listening devices in to find out this girl's address. And then, I don't know if they ever did that, but they tapped the phone lines, which was very easy back then. Bittaker said him and Norris would do it all the time, I guess, like back, in the 70s, 60s, whatever. It wasn't hard to do, he said. He would have been a killer regardless whether he met Bittaker or not. I mean, his rapes were very violent and becoming more violent. I don't think he would have went on to become a serial killer because I don't think he was too impulsive. He did have a very high IQ, though. He did have a 130 IQ.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, even if it's one word.
And please subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos. We're also now on YouTube at Partners in True Crime. If you subscribe to our website, you'll be getting weekly emails from us and all kinds of promotions and things that we don't advertise on the podcast.
We have a special announcement for all of our fans of Season 1, Who Killed Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. And it's coming this Wednesday.
We have some new and interesting updates in the case that all of you are going to need to hear. Even though we haven't posted new episodes on Molly and Colt's case, we haven't stopped our investigation into what happened to them.
This Wednesday, we're going to be releasing a series of interviews that we conducted with someone who is a key figure in the many questions related to this case.
This person has never spoken to anyone publicly, and what they have to say will turn what some people have been saying about this case upside down. You can binge Season 1, Who Killed Molly Miller and Colt Haynes, on our website, www.partnersintruecrime.com, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Now for this week's podcast. Since we started doing the podcast with Laura Brand, all of you have sent us some great questions for Laura to answer.
So today we're going to have Laura answer some of those questions that you sent in. But if we didn't get to your particular question, don't worry, we will address them on another podcast in the future.
Laura's still up at San Quentin finishing up her interviews with the serial killers before they officially closed death row and moved them to other prisons. But she was able to step away to talk with us today.
Very eventful. I think about 4 of the serial killers all had meltdowns at the same time.
While you were in there?
Yeah. I couldn't wait to get out. Like, that was the first day. Like, I could not wait until when they opened the cage, I was like darting out. I was like, I'm out of here. Today was a little better.
What prompted all the meltdowns? Did you anticipate it when you walked in?
And who were you in there to see yesterday? Let's start there.
I was in there to see James Marlowe, who he had on the show. I was doing a follow-up with him, and then I was sitting down with Wayne Adam Ford as my second one. And then I did the cage check. So I go from cage to cage when the other guys are down, and I talk to them. So as I'm making my rounds, 2 of them start fighting, through the glass. Wayne's having a meltdown about, his mental health and the transfers. I think it's just like the impending doom of the transfers. Like, it's just getting so hot in there right now. Like, everything's changing. They don't want to leave. The environment, is out of control for them. So it's like they're out of control now.
Well, they've been there for a long time, and now
right.
now their environment's going to change dramatically.
Were you worried about your safety at all yesterday?
Not yesterday. The ones that were like getting really crazy were thankfully in cages by themselves, popping off. I wasn't in the cage with them. But yeah, I got pretty heated with some of the arguments they were having.
What were they arguing about?
Just prison bullshit, really. In prison, they'll argue about, a book of stamps, anything. You called my girlfriend, whatever. It's just like, it's almost like, it's prison bullshit, but it's also like 13-year-old girl drama at the same time. But except when, they're doing this on death row, these are like very dangerous and violent criminals. So it can turn deadly really quick.
How often are they commingling together, or do they have their yard times separate from each other?
No, they have their yard time together. Yeah, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday they can come down into the visiting room. The North Seg of death row, their cells are open, so they can be out on the tier, going from cell to cell. They're not like locked down completely.
And then what is the drop dead deadline for them to be all out of there? I remember you said earlier it might have been like the end of February.
They told me last I heard it was February 24th. Today I heard it's now extending 2 weeks. But then I also heard today the first bus is moving out this coming Thursday. So I'm hearing a ton of different stuff. By this weekend, we'll know if the first bus has gone out.
Yeah. I think they're purposely not sharing information. I think they're just going to come in and just do it and not let anybody know.
Well, they won't let anybody know, not even the offenders themselves. They're going to take their tablets away that night, and they'll move them in the middle of the night.
Interesting. And do they all have places where they're going? I know some of them know.
Yes. I think a lot of them are finding out. A lot of them, ironically, are going to CMC East, which is where Bittaker and Norris met.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're?
I don't know why I think they're looking at different programs. Like they can now go into, when they're in, general population, they can get jobs, and there's different programs and schooling they can do. So I think a lot of that is like what they're looking at, like what programs or jobs they want to do, that kind of stuff.
Because right now they don't have any jobs, right?
No, they can't work on death row, and they don't have. They have programs, but it's very limited.
Okay. All right. So we've been getting a lot of questions online about the podcast, and specifically people have questions for you.
So this episode is going to be, we have some questions from the audience that really, they've been sending a whole bunch that they want you to answer for them. But there's also been a lot of questions about Norris. We've been focusing so much on Bittaker, so we wanted to dive a little bit more into him today and kind of understand maybe his pathology a little bit more, since we've been talking about Bittaker the whole time.
Mostly because you spent a lot of FaceTime with Bittaker as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll just jump into some of these questions. I'm going to start with the first one. The first one is actually about Bittaker, which is ironic. Do you think Bittaker was autistic, or is his behavior due to lack of socialization as a child? Do you think he's on the spectrum, or he was on the spectrum?
I don't think he was on the spectrum. He was socially awkward at times, but I wouldn't place him on the spectrum. I've been asked a lot to look into if there is a correlation between, being autistic and some of these serial killers. Wayne Adam Ford is one of them who's actually asked me to look into it because he really believes it is a possibility. It's something I do want to explore later down the line, but as far for Bittaker, no.
Do you think that it's because of his lack of socialization as a child? I mean, I know he had a pretty high IQ, didn't he? It was like 135?
138.
138, yeah. That's pretty high.
Yeah.
I mean, Bittaker came from a pretty decent family, too. That's the thing that's...
Yeah, there was just neglect in the household. And, he was personable. You could have a conversation with him. He was just like at times awkward. Like there was, when we would sit in the cage or there was like any, awkward moments of silence or something, he would start saying facts about animals because they all watch PBS. They love to watch the animal shows and stuff. So like he didn't know how to handle the awkward silence. So he would start spewing out facts about animals. But that's just something that he does, as an awkward tick. It wasn't really, I would place it on the spectrum as autistic.
Do you think that when he was a kid, was he socializing with other kids? Like, what was his childhood like in that respect?
When he was in Florida, he was in Leesburg, Florida. They owned a motel kind of like in the middle of nowhere. Funny how he later, goes on to live in these motels. He was pretty isolated. And what's really crazy about that, too, is he told me the only neighbor he had was a tools salesman down the street. Very ironic. So, when he was in Florida, he didn't have like many neighbors, many kids to play with. He reports that there was no birthday parties, but I do have a picture of him playing Little League as a child. So, I mean, when I did explore that, with him about his childhood and stuff, he did say like his dad did take him to Boy Scouts, did take him to the Little League games. So it wasn't like he was, totally neglected. It sounded like his dad was doing like, father-son stuff with him and trying to get him, around other children, doing stuff like that.
Was his father in his life the whole time, or did he?
Yes. Well, this is the adoptive father, technically his uncle. Yeah. He actually wanted to continue a relationship with Bittaker. It was I think it was in his late 20s, his adopted mother just said, I've had it. Like, he was in and out of prison. He was just, asylums, everything. He was just a raging psychopath. So she couldn't do it anymore. And he kept visiting Bittaker in jail and wherever he was at the time. And finally, she had said to her husband, if you keep, visiting him in a relationship with him, our marriage is going to end. So he finally cut off Bittaker, but he didn't want to.
How old was he when he was living in Florida?
He was around 8, I think they moved to Florida.
So let's go back just a step. So his adopted parents was his uncle?
Yeah, so it was his mother. She had him and his little brother. He was an Irish twin, Charles, year apart. She was 17 when she had Bittaker, and then she was going out and partying. The family said, you have to give the boys up. It's just not a safe household for them, because she was putting the crib at night, like she would leave them alone, but put the crib almost like a cage for them just to house them. And they're like, this is crazy. She'd come back drunk. Both boys got adopted within the family by a great aunt and uncle of Bittaker's biological mother.
So the adopted dad was related to Bittaker by blood?
Actually, no. It was the mother. Yeah, Thelma was his adopted mother, was actually the one related to him by blood.
The aunt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So she was just fed up with him after he became an adult.
She just couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. I mean, you got to remember, he started having behavioral problems like very early on. I mean, taking pliers and ripping out the teeth of rabbits. He went down the street and almost killed a man by trying to steal curtains off his, windows, and by using a lighter. And then everything caught fire. He ran out. A guy was sleeping upstairs and he almost killed this elderly man. He was only 12 years old at the time. That was just the start of all of his behavioral issues. By his teenage years, he's stalking neighborhoods. He's going into houses. He's molesting women while they're sleeping. He was never caught for any of this. But yeah, he told me about all of his crimes. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. When they started, like 14, 15, he's stealing cars. He's, lurking. He's stalking. He's going into houses, molesting.
Well, I think it does start very early, as we all know, based upon the psychology of when serial killers become so. They start off hurting animals, they have strange relationships with their mother, and, and they just, they have no empathy. That's how they start building that no empathy.
Yes. There's always like a primal breakdown with the mother, I see, typically. That's the most sacred bond you can have, is a mother and her child. And I think when that is, disturbed in some sort of way, whether it be neglect or abuse, that really can reshape the brain and do a lot of damage, especially considering the age of a child. And Bittaker would have been 1 to 3 years old when she's leaving him, alone at night with his little brother in this like makeshift cage and going out and drinking. And also his biological father was reportedly very violent and threw her through a window, which Bittaker had seen as a little kid too. And kids are taking in everything,
They're
whether
sponges.
we know it or not. They're sponges. Exactly.
Even if they can't see it, if they hear it.
Right.
How about Norris? Similar upbringing?
He had, I would say, even a better upbringing than Bittaker. To me, he reported a very white picket fence kind of upbringing. He had his mother and his father. Grandparents lived down the street. Little sister, they were always going to those roller rinks.
Yep.
Back in the day. Yeah. The only thing he reported to me, which I can see where maybe this is where the underlying sadism started, was his grandparents hated his mother. So growing up, they would call her a whore, a slut, in front of Norris and his sister, and just degrade his mother, in front of him.
Which essentially is degrading him.
Yes.
That's what they don't realize.
I know.
When people get divorced, or if someone doesn't like one of the parents, when you start desecrating one of the parents, you're actually desecrating the child too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really bad.
I mean, they're just starting to talk about this parental alienation and how and there's been lots of books. I actually read one because I was a victim of that as well. But it really screws up not only the kid, but the fathers too. Because what the fathers do is they don't know how to handle it, and they just they retreat and they just go off and hide, and they don't have relationships with their kids because they feel so shamed. And and the kids are left, because they're a part of the father that's part of them, they feel it too. And no one really talks about it, but it's being spoken about a lot more. And so I can see how that can really do a number. And depending upon the age of the child,
Oh, yeah.
That's, if they're older. I mean, fortunately, my Kids were a lot older, but it still had a pretty big effect.
Oh, I imagine. It's a huge rejection at such a young age the kid is feeling from a parent.
Mm-hmm.
When you were saying that Bittaker had a neighbor who was a tool salesman, that's kind of interesting.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did he say anything else about that person?
I kept questioning him about that because something just kept bringing me back to that tool salesman, because he had just said it as like a passing statement. And I was like, wait. You became the toolbox killer. You used tools in your murders. Like, now you're telling me like the only neighbor you have is a tool salesman. And I had said to him, I was like, Larry, did this guy rape you?
Mm-hmm.
Did he use tools on you? No, he said no, but I really, to this day, I wonder.
Would he ever admit something like that to you? I mean,
men almost really never admit to rape. I forget what the statistic is for that, but I don't know if he would. Now, Bittaker did admit he was raped in San Quentin at 19 later on, but I don't know, maybe as a child, he just didn't want to talk about it. Maybe it was too shameful, horrific. I don't know. But I really always wondered if that had happened.
Because it is pretty random to become someone who uses tools to murder people when you're a child growing up next to someone who's selling tools.
And he started using the tools with the pliers with the teeth and stuff when he was around 8, which is very young for a kid. And where would he get these ideas from to use tools on body parts? It made me think maybe there was more with that tool salesman.
Could be. I mean, salesmen are usually traveling around, and they're easy to kind of disappear in society.
What part of Florida was this in?
Leesburg, Florida.
Okay, yeah, we know what that is.
Yeah, that's pretty rural.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
All right, let's go on with another question here. One of the other listeners' question is, why was Bittaker so interested in Lynette? Did he ever explain why? Did he ask other teenage girls out on dates? Well, I think we spoke a little bit about that on some of the other podcasts, but can you speak more specifically to it, Laura?
I don't think, he was like fixated on Lynette more than any other girl. Like, yeah, he came into the McDonald's and kept asking her out. But Bittaker was, a hunter, a stalker, just like Norris. They hunted a lot of girls. They would go into their place of business and work because they're watching their habits. They're seeing when they come into work, they leave work, where they're driving to, when they go home. They're looking for the girl's most vulnerable points of when she's, maybe she's coming out at 5 a.m. and nobody's outside, but it's still dark. That kind of thing. So once they get fixated on a victim that they want to hunt and troll, they'll just keep chasing that. I would say, I don't think Lynette was chased any more than the other ones, but the rejection or his perceived rejection, let me say that, from him asking her out and her just politely saying no, could have made him want to hunt her more, and maybe, or kept trying and going back to that McDonald's and asking, hoping she would change her mind or something.
Well, I'm sure each time he went in there, he was learning more and more about her and collecting data on her behavior, how she deals with humans, other people, and that would lead him up to put a plan together to snatch her when she's ready to be snatched.
Yeah. And, he probably followed her home to school. I wouldn't be surprised if he had been following her to and from work. He had followed many of the girls, from their place of employment. Their big thing was going to LAX and actually following, the stews from there to their homes or wherever they were staying from LAX.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like he was doing that quite a bit, asking out teenage girls as if they would go out with him.
Did he explain how he actually thought they would kind of go for that line?
No, not really explained it, but I had talked to him. I said, do you think your emotional intelligence was stunted at this age that you were hunting at? Because his was lower than Norris's, I would say, a little bit, just by a few years. And
that was his emotional intelligence, you said?
Yeah. Because his victimology type was just about a year or two lower than Norris's for the teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a lot of conversations about that. The emotional intelligence being stunted around there. Same with Norris too.
That's crazy. Because that's the biggest thing. It's just I know men will try always looking for younger women, but that teenagers and you're almost 40?
Yeah. Well, it's very common for serial killers. There's two aspects of it. A lot of them do have lower emotional intelligence. So whatever range of their victimology type, sometimes that can be an insight into their emotional intelligence level of where they're at. However, also, what a lot of serial killers have reported to me is they will go actually college age girls, like 20s, but they switch to teenagers because they're more naive. By the college age girls have already, had creepy teenage boys all over them, and they're just more seasoned, and they're just more aware of everything. Where teenage girls in high school, they're not. So they're easier prey for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true predator's mindset. I mean, it's no different from, animals out in the wild. They always look for the youngest, weakest to attack.
Right, exactly.
When he did take Lynette, how long did he keep her alive before he killed her?
I mean, it wasn't long. It was a couple hours. They had gotten her in the van and instantly, bound her, started the tortures, recordings. I think it was maybe just a little bit over 2 hours before they finally killed her.
It's so awful. Okay, so the next question is, on episode 5, the expert says that Bittaker stabbing girls in the ear was symbolic for his girlfriend never listening to him. Is this something that Bittaker said himself, or is this just a theory?
This was a theory that Alan and I had spoken about. I wouldn't say it's not just the girlfriend. It was symbolic more of everyone in his life. His mother, biological, adopted parents, the girlfriend, just everybody in his life. Like, he never had anybody. He really grew up very alone and isolated because he never really had friends. So it's like he feels like he has nothing and no one, and he's never been heard. So I think it was more of a symbolic of not being heard at all. And this is his turn to say, people are going to finally hear me and my pain in the most violent fashion I can perform it.
And then he never told you why they used tools? Because they're more like props, like torture props they were using them as.
I was just going to say just sadism for the literally just to inflict the greatest amount of pain on the human body.
But leaving them inside the people that's another level.
Leaving them inside the...
Yeah, like the ice pick in the ear and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like another level. Because, to me, I don't even know what that is. It's just a display of like their work, because what they do is they keep themselves exposed to the murder possibly being traced back to them if their bodies are found.
Yeah, well, it's a signature, really.
Yeah.
That's their signature. And it's a very unique and specific, and it speaks to their level of sadism because, puncturing an eardrum is the most intense, agonizing pain people report. And then once it would go inside, this would not kill you. All you would hear is blood rushing through your brain. Like, you'd go deaf and just hear blood.
Ugh.
You start to lose function, but you're totally conscious while this is happening. It is one of the slowest and most painful ways you could kill a human being. It is very slow. That is another aspect of why I think they chose the ice pick through the ear. I mean, they were going for, the most savage, brutal way to kill these girls.
And that's the thing. So here, again, we go back to this question. Is that a genetic DNA problem? Is that just someone who's just wired completely wrong? Or is it...
You have two people doing this together.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are they feeding off of each other? Are they both just wired wrong? Is it a DNA thing? Is it a nurture versus nature thing? Like, it's still so confusing how this can happen.
I think it's, a perfect storm of both. It's, genetics can play a part. If someone's born with antisocial tendencies, that comes from genetics. But then also you've got to look at the nurture, the upbringing, somebody with a genetic predisposition, and then you have, an abusive childhood added on. It's already the perfect storm coming together, to formulate what we now know as a serial killer. I think it's just different elements all coming together, and this is the end result.
Yeah, it's crazy. You have another question?
Yeah. What age did his sexually motivated crimes start?
Oh, for Bittaker or Norris?
Both.
Bittaker's was very early. I think it was 12 when he started going into the houses and like peeping through windows. And then shortly after, he started actually touching the women sleeping. Norris was right around that time too. The attempted rape on his cousin I think he was 16. But he had started tapping girls' phone lines, I think it was 15, to extort them for sexual purposes.
So he was tapping their phone line so he could get information on what they were doing in their private life?
To extort them for sex.
How on earth was he tapping their phones?
Well, remember, he's an electrician.
Yeah.
They actually tapped the Church of Scientology's phone line to hunt that girl, Gretchen, the missing victim that I've been trying to find.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So they really put themselves out there.
They were not subtle. It's really shocking because, I've gone to the abduction points at the same time of day that they took these girls. Some were broad daylight, none were in the dark. I mean, they were literally just ripping these girls, off the street, right on PCH, broad daylight, or sun is just setting, still light out.
Did he say why they did it so openly?
No, I would just say when I went to like every scene, especially at the time of day, it really opened my eyes because I saw just how brazen they were, just how bold they were. And it kind of really hit me just how dangerous these two were. Just seeing their level of boldness and brazen. And two sadistic serial killers doing this in broad daylight in such a populated, safe neighborhood.
Hey, Lord, have you ever seen Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, that movie?
I haven't seen it.
You should watch it because it's about two guys. And in fact, I just looked up to see if they based it after Roy and Larry, but it wasn't. They actually based it loosely on Henry Lee Lucas and Otis O'Toole. But that relationship, when I remember watching it, it was a scary ass movie, by the way. I mean, I had to like literally cleanse my brain after watching it. I watched it in the daytime and had to go outside and let the sun hit my face because it was just pretty disturbing. Because it looked like a documentary. It looked like the serial killers were filming it themselves. So and that's how they kind of staged some of it too. But just looking at the relationship between those two guys, and they were doing the same thing. They were doing stuff in broad daylight. Like some of the things they were doing was not stalking people, but if they were driving on a freeway and they saw someone pulled over and their car is like flat tire or something, they would offer to help. And then that's when they would take them. And then they would take them back to their house, and then they would, basically do whatever they want to them before they kill them. But
it's scary because they're always, in that hunting, trolling mode. If they see a victim of opportunity, they will stop and go for them. And it really is just the wrong place at the wrong time, or just they're always hunting.
Go back to this Gretchen victim for a second. They were tapping the Scientology phone lines.
Yeah.
Why?
They were trying to find this girl's address. They'd run her plate, and it had went back to the Church of Scientology in Glendale, but they were trying to find her home address. So they had the bright idea to tap the Church of Scientology's phone lines, hoping it would be set over a phone line.
How were they able to do that?
How were they able to get the plates?
Norris had a female friend who was working, I think it was a bail bondsman or a sheriff. Bittaker said he hit her car, and he feels so bad he's on parole. He wants to give her the money. He doesn't want to go back to jail. Sob story. She ran the plate, gave it to Bittaker. She was the one with the 4 daughters, one of which Bittaker actually hunted and wanted really badly. She was actually letting Bittaker and Roy come over and take her 4 young daughters, teenage daughters, out too. And 2 of the girls were molested.
Wait, why was she allowing them to come and take her daughters out?
They were supplying her with drugs.
So she just pimped out her daughters.
Yeah.
Lovely.
The one girl who was molested was 12 years old, and she actually they were going to subpoena her to court, and she flipped and said, I'm going to kill myself. Paul Bynum, the detective, found out she had said she's going to kill herself, and he's like, I'm not having this 12-year-old girl. She's been through enough. Testify. And he told Stephen K, no, we're not doing this. So Paul Bynum really protected the really young girls from testifying. He said, no way. We have the tape. These girls do not have to be put through hell. So she didn't have to testify, but instead Paul made the mother come and sit in court every day, and she had to listen to Lynette Ledford's tape. He wanted that mother to know what she had put her 4 daughters around.
Unbelievable. How were they able to tap the Scientology phone then? So they got the plates run through this woman that they were supplying with drugs, and she was using her daughters to kind of barter with them. So she runs the plates for them, and they were able to find that this woman, Gretchen, was associated with the Church of Scientology in Glendale. But how were they able to tap the phones in Scientology building?
They even joined the Church of Scientology.
I remember you said that.
Wait, yeah, I don't remember this story. So, wait, tell me this story.
They actually joined the Church of Scientology to hunt this girl.
Oh my God.
And then they offered the Church of Scientology, they said they do security, they can put some cameras in. They were trying to put listening devices in to find out this girl's address. And then, I don't know if they ever did that, but they tapped the phone lines, which was very easy back then. Bittaker said him and Norris would do it all the time, I guess, back, in the 70s, 60s, whatever. It wasn't hard to do, he said. So they tapped the phone lines trying to get it that way. But yeah, they literally went into the church and joined the church.
Where did they see this woman, Gretchen, or this girl?
He had first spotted her at a gas station. and followed her.
And she's one of the victims that's still missing.
I only have a first name. I've contacted the Church of Scientology. I don't have a last name, unfortunately. I have a license plate number for her.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, maybe we can see.
Wouldn't the license plate number have the registration and the last name and information there?
All I have, the discovery, you got to remember this is 1970s, so like police reports are not like they are today.
Mm-hmm.
So all it is literally Gretchen, and then it just has a license plate number. I have contacted other PIs, and I've contacted like the California DMVs and stuff. These records from back then, a lot of things have turned over to the computer and filed, but a lot of paper copies, which is back in the 70s, they don't have anymore, unfortunately. We could still dig and try to find it, because that's literally all I have is her name, the connection that she worked or was part of the Church of Scientology in Glendale, and a license plate number, and the make and model of her car.
What was the make and model?
I believe it was a Volkswagen Beetle or like a convertible, something like that. And she was blonde and blue-eyed.
How old was she?
Young. I want to say 19 or 20, or she looked to be.
All right.
But that shows you the level they would go to hunt, a victim.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like, if they got you in their tractor beam, that was it. They weren't going to stop until they got you.
Yeah, even when Norris wrote out how to survive a serial killer tips to me, he had said, if someone has their sights on you, you just have to move. That's the only way. Norris said that.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who's watching you.
Right. How would you know?
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to trust your instincts, because you really just don't know. Just don't talk to strangers. I mean, that's really the key here. But even so, some of these girls never spoke to him. They were just standing at the gas station.
Yeah. Most of the girls that were photographed that the police found and went and talked to, they had no idea they were photographed, even at different locations at the beach, car wash, McDonald's. They were photographed all over the place and they had no idea.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Do you want to do number 6?
Sure. Is it 6 or?
6. We already did 5.
All right. So this is the question. What did Andrea say to Bittaker before she was killed? You said she psychologically damaged him.
I have to save this for the book, but I will tell you guys this. She did some damage because when he snapped that picture of her face saying to her, why should I let you live? And, she knew that it was going to be the end. I think she just had that realization because Bittaker said the entire time, she tried everything, psychological tips for an 18-year-old. She was trying to get to know him, talk about his childhood. She was really trying to connect with him, talk to him through this. And it was just she knew this guy was just going to kill her. She was like, fuck you. I'm not going to beg for my life. And people are going to come looking for me. Would anybody come looking for you?
So she basically humanized herself to the point where she was no longer just a prey. She was a living, breathing entity and with a brain.
She went off and she said, I'm going to, I know what you're going to do. You're not going to get me begging my last breath.
I can imagine she might have said something like, I'm going to haunt you until the day you die.
Oh, yeah. She went in.
Terrible. Poor girl.
Poor. Well, listen, you got to give her credit for being so powerful at the most vulnerable point in her life.
And, Andrea saved 2 girls that following week, I think it was, because they had picked up 2 girls that they were attracted to, Bittaker said, let's get them, but they were athletically fit. And Andrea had just beaten up Norris so badly. He's like, no, I don't want to try it again. So they let those 2 girls out. So we know Andrea Hall saved 2 girls from being so strong.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Well, good for her for fighting back.
Yeah.
So awful. Poor family. It's a sad, sad story. This is another question someone sent in. Did Norris lie about where Cindy's body was located, or did he just forget?
Okay, so everyone asked this question about why the placement for Cindy and Andrea. Okay, so the one murder that both of their accounts for every single murder match up identically, except for Cindy Schaefer. Okay, Norris said that, he started to strangle Cindy, and the look in her eye got him so sick that he ran to the front of the van and started throwing up. I always knew that story was such bullshit because he had choked girls out to the point of being unconscious. He had just raped a woman in Redondo, choked her with a scarf, knocked her out. This was the crime that put him, in CMC. So for him to say the look in her eye made me throw up, bullshit. So I knew that story was bullshit automatically. So he said he threw up and then Bittaker finished it. Now Bittaker's version is different. And he says that he was manually strangling her and then she started convulsing. They went in the van, they got the vice grip, they wrapped around her neck and they both kind of twisted it with the pliers but Norris grabbed a hammer and hit her twice in the skull. Now, this version of what happened, Bittaker gave to his attorney Garber. This is the same version that Bittaker gave me 40 years later of the account of what happened to Cindy. Norris's version of what he told them at the time changed, and then he told me that he was on angel dust and he was sleeping. That was his 2019 version of what happened. And then I had the detailed reports of him throwing up is what he told them originally. So I saw that Bittaker's story stayed consistent. Norris's did not. So let's look at that. So let's say that hammer. So Bittaker had always kept telling me, go, there are hammers there. We threw the hammer. You can find the hammer. It shows that I'm telling the truth. He was so adamant about it. And when I looked through the court transcripts, Garber, his attorney, kept asking Norris about the hammer. So I knew Bittaker had told him 40 years prior, under attorney-client privileges. Now, Norris was the one up there pointing to the locations. If Cindy Schaefer had been found and she had a fracture in her skull, automatically it shows that Bittaker's version of events is correct. And now Norris not only has one victim, but two victims, because he was only charged with the murder of Lynette. The skull of Cindy Schaefer could not be found, so he moved where they actually placed her a mile down. He didn't want Cindy found because the skull would have been, could have given him the death penalty. Mm-hmm. That's what was on the table, the death penalty versus life with the possibility of parole. If Cindy was found, he was getting the death penalty.
Well, that makes sense then.
Perfect sense.
Yeah, we've been down that road before with Gary Ridgway. Mm-hmm. That's he did the same thing where he was going to show them bodies, and I think he showed them a couple. I don't even know if they found any. They found a couple, but out of the tons of bodies that people he killed, and so he avoided the death penalty, and a lot of people think he shouldn't have avoided the death penalty, but I don't think it would have made a difference. I don't think Washington doesn't have the death penalty anymore anyway, so.
No.
Well, Andrea's is crazier because Norris wasn't even there when she was murdered. He has no idea where she was murdered, yet he is on the mountain during the search pointing out an area. He goes, I think it's over there.
Yeah, going through the motions.
At a convenience store. He had dropped Andrea and Bittaker up on the fire road and then drove back into town. And he just waited for the walkie for when Bittaker said, I'm ready. He had no idea where Andrea was even killed. So Andrea has never been searched for. You have a Norris up there giving you the placements of the bodies. So look at the two found, Jackie and Leah. Those were the only two bodies he could give. Mm-hmm. If he can't give Cindy, he doesn't know where Andrea is. Those are the only two he could give.
Yeah, but he's pleading his case, so I'm going to say I can give him all of them.
Right. All right. So let's look at Norris a little bit. Do you want to give us a little bit of a background on Norris and his childhood and how you met him and what that relationship was like?
Do you want me to read his declaration?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I grew up in Greenlee, Colorado. I still have family there. From an early age, I developed a preoccupation with sex and sexual fantasies. At some point in my life, I became a rapist. I also developed a pattern throttling or choking women that I was sexually attracted to. I have always been obsessed with cheerleaders or the cheerleader type. I am especially attracted to those girls who think that they are too good for me. I like it when they have a sort of haughty attitude. I become sexually aroused when a girl spurs my advances. For example, I think, I'm not going to say her name.
No.
Oh my God, the woman who was murdered last year is my type. Ew, he was looking at a murdered victim when he just said that. She is the type of broad that I could see taking up into the mountains for 3 or 4 days and raping the hell out of her. It would be worth it to rape somebody like her. One time I was in junior high school. I made a comment to a classmate that I wanted to screw a girl named Kathy. He went and told her what I had said and that she should slap me. Sometime later, I went up and talked to her in the class. She hauled off and slapped me across the face, so hard that my glasses went flying across the room. I was embarrassed in front of the whole class. My pattern of obsessive behavior intensified as I went into high school. I learned how to tap phone lines, and it was then that I found out just how manipulative girls are and how they really feel about sex. It all started because a friend of mine, Jerry, had a girlfriend that was acting cold towards him, and he wanted to find out why. Jerry and I listened to a conversation between this girl and her friend. They talked about how they really wanted to have sex, but they had to put on an act with a guy. We found out that my friend's girlfriend was screwing around on him too. From then on, I tapped the phone lines alone. I tapped the lines of girls that I was interested in. I probably tapped around 30 to 40 phone lines in Greenlee, Colorado. In that period of time, I would sit there in the dark just a few feet away from their houses listening to their conversations, I found.
So disturbing. So when you first met Norris, what year was it? How long ago was it? And what was your first interaction like with him?
Let's see, it was 2014. He was very receptive, where Bittaker wasn't. They really just switched places. But Bittaker was, Norris was very receptive. Biggest difference I noticed right away with Bittaker and Norris is that Norris was a sexual deviant straight off the bat. Like he didn't hide it. He was all of his verbiage was very sexual. The way he spoke on the phone, his letters, everything was about sex. Where Bittaker wasn't like that. Bittaker actually he didn't talk about sex actually. So I saw that was the biggest difference between both of them. You could tell Norris was just a frenzied, he was a serial rapist before he became a serial killer before that. But yeah, he was a sexual deviant but had no impulse control.
Do you know when that switched, when he became a rapist and then a killer? What was that?
It went from, when he met Bittaker, he would have been a killer regardless whether he met Bittaker or not. His rapes were very violent and becoming more violent. I don't think he would have went on to become a serial killer because I don't think he was too impulsive. He did have a very high IQ though. He did have a 130 IQ, but again, he was very impulsive, sloppy. He probably would have been caught after the first murder. Teaming up with Bittaker, that's really how he became a serial killer. But he would have become a killer regardless.
What was his childhood like?
Like I said, he reports it as just everyday America, Greenlee, Colorado, white picket fence with his mom, dad, little sister going to the, roller rink every Friday night. Nothing except for the grandparents degrading the mother. But then I think let me look at this file. He starts talking about how all right, I'm just going to read these 2 pages because it talks about does try to rape his cousin. And I have spoken to this cousin's sister, but he was 16 when he tried to rape his own cousin. I also realized that I could get secrets and blackmail for girls for sex. I really should have done that. Once I was eavesdropping on the phone conversation, I heard a girl tell her friend that she would be going up to Glen Mere Lake that night to have sex with her boyfriend. I went up there and found them. They were in the car together having sex. I took a picture and surprised them. Although the picture didn't come out, I called her, disguised my voice in order to blackmail her. I told her that she had to give me oral sex and I would reveal the picture or I would reveal the picture to everyone. She was very upset.
Did she do it?
Yeah.
How old was she?
The last thing he says for age, he's saying junior high.
Wow. So it's 13.
God. So this sexual deviancy is very, very young. And I don't believe that can be cured. So do you believe that because he met Bittaker, that's when it intensified because he had a partner now?
Yeah. Well, especially with sexual sadists is a lot of them do, partner up because it actually intensifies the thrill for them.
Because they have an audience.
Yeah, exactly. It
validates what they're doing.
Correct. And that's why you'll see sadists take audio tapes, pictures, videotapes, movies, snuff films. That's very typical, a sexual sadist.
Because they want the audience, they want the attention.
Yeah.
Well, they're also totems.
Yeah. And to relive it, too,
So how old was he when he met Bittaker? Or when was the first time he got arrested for rape? Do we know?
It says he committed 3 rapes in high school he was never caught or charged for. Joined the Navy in 1967. Then he started assaulting women over in Vietnam. And that's why, and he started strangling them in Vietnam too.
Did he kill anyone? We don't know. He could have killed someone.
Oh, remember Gary Ridgway was the same thing?
Yeah, Gary Ridgway did the same thing. And
he was overseas.
So did this other nutcase that I had an encounter with in Texas. Yeah, so he easily could have been killing before he met Bittaker. We just don't know.
Oh, it says on leave from the Navy for, choking and raping the women in Vietnam. He raped a 13-year-old girl in his hometown in Colorado.
Now, was he caught? Was he caught for doing that in the Navy?
He was, but it was over in Vietnam. So I guess, back then he finally was dishonorably discharged. It sounds like they sent him back on leave. I think he came back and continued. I think that's when they finally got rid of him. The 13-year-old girl was, her parents were friends with his parents and they would socialize together.
Ugh. Horrifying.
I followed her upstairs. He grabbed her by the throat and choked her, strangled her at 13. So this is when he is in the Navy young, 18, 19. I only stopped strangling this 13-year-old girl that he knew. This was his parents' friend, when she went completely limp.
So he almost killed her.
Yeah.
So did he get arrested for that?
No, because they were friends of the parents.
Oh my God. Can you imagine not pressing charges against someone who did that to your child?
I know.
It was a different time, the 70s.
Way different time.
I'm telling you, these kids today, they don't know what went on. I mean, when we were little in the 70s, there was a lot of stuff going on that shouldn't have been going on.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so when was the first time that he got arrested?
I'm waiting for that to happen, like after all these rapes. Oh, wow. I don't think he was arrested until he finally moved over to California, and he was stalking. Oh, no. Wait, I'm sorry. He did go to college camp. This is the University of Northern Colorado. He strangled a girl and raped her. They interviewed him for this one. No arrest, just interviewed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So his behavior was getting reinforced.
Yeah. I mean, he's just getting away with it. That was the first time he was interviewed for a rape and a strangle. Crazy.
He didn't get away with the neighbor's daughter, and then
the neighbor's daughter, his own cousin.
In Vietnam.
Yeah.
I mean, he got dishonorably discharged, but like that means you just kicked out. You get kicked out of the military. You get kicked out of the military. That's it. I mean, it's like coming out of prison, but it's like during that time, Vietnam was people coming out of Vietnam. They were not treated right anyway.
Oh, it says now. Okay, so 1969, he's still in the Navy. He's in Hawaii. He raped and strangled a girl coming out of a bar. They called the cops, but he ran away. Okay, here's his first. Okay, in 1969, it was charged with the attempted rape in San Diego. The charges were later dropped for lack of evidence. Then there's another girl in San Diego. They were at a bar drinking. She invited him back to her place to sleep on the couch. She woke up with him on top of her, strangling her. He choked her until she was unconscious and ran out.
What year was that, does it say?
1969.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is like 11 years before.
Then he went on to rape her friend that same night.
Oh, my God. And none of these girls were able to press charges because it was a different time back then. It wasn't so easy to get someone arrested for rape in the early 70s or late 60s. Mm-hmm. These poor women, they were just tortured by these men. So when was he finally arrested? Do we know? We're still looking, right?
Yeah.
Still going through pages.
It's just going through
pages and pages. I mean, it's insane.
It's really crazy. He's like, raped this one, got away. Raped this one, got away.
So over dozens of women were raped by this guy before he was arrested.
He says the exact number. I'm going to find it. I think it's towards the end. He does count how many. Or no, I think it's in the three figures when he finally says about.
Like in the hundreds?
Yeah.
It says he was arrested in San Diego in November 1969 for attempted rape.
He bashed a girl with a beer bottle over the head while driving in Torrance. The beer bottle broke on her head and she lost control of the car. Okay, 1970. I was arrested for an incident in San Diego.
Yeah, it was May. Well, let's say what the incident was. I have it here. May 1970, Norris attacked a female student at San Diego State University campus. He jumped her from behind and hit her in the head with a rock. She survived.
Yeah.
Isn't that when he was sent to Atascadero?
I believe that was the one, yeah.
So what does he say? What does his statement say?
I was arrested for, there's 2 assaults in 1970. I was arrested for another assault in the time of 1970. I was on the San Diego State University campus. I saw a co-ed who I later found out was named Kay. I hit her on the back of the head with a rock to knock her down and slam her head on the sidewalk repeatedly. After my arrest for this first incident, I was interviewed by 3 or 4 psychologists. I was classified as a mentally disordered sex offender and sentenced, at Tuscadero. I was originally supposed to be there for only 18 months. I ended up staying there for 5 years. I was the happiest there. Interesting.
That was a mental hospital, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And at the time, they housed SVPs, sexually violent predators there. They don't do it anymore.
It says the typical stay is 2 years there. And they kept him for 5. So obviously they saw a reason to keep him 3 more years.
And everybody there is on a ton of meds.
Mm-hmm. This is where he meets Joe Jackson.
Exactly.
All right. So tell us about Joe Jackson.
Well, he comes later into play because he's a serial rapist. They get out. Both of them end up at CMC East, weirdly enough, on D Block. And that's where, they meet Lawrence Whitaker. And this is how it all came together.
So wait a second. Let's go back for a second. So Roy Norris meets Joe Jackson at Atascadero Mental Hospital. Then he gets out. What happens after Norris gets out of the mental hospital? He goes right back to doing this again?
Yes. So now he goes back to Redondo Beach. He goes to the restaurant Old Tony's on the pier. He's sitting at the bar and he sees this woman he's attracted to, and she leaves. Her husband stays and continues drinking. She leaves, goes out on the pier. He follows her out. He waits until she's at the end of the pier and he drags her, strangling her with her scarf and raping her in a bush. He gets away. But a month later, this woman is with her husband in the car. Their 2 sons in the back seat, and they notice Roy is in front of them on his motorcycle. So they wrote down the license plate and he got arrested. That's when he goes to CMC East.
What's CMC East, for people that don't know?
That's San Luis Obispo men's colony, a prison in...
San Luis Obispo, California, which is about 3 hours north of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's about Central California.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes there, and this is probably, 1976?
He only served about 3 years or even less than 3 years for that crime. No, I think it was just 3 years. He got sentenced to like 3 years to 20 years or something, but he served only 3 because he's back out on the street in January of 1979. And he actually, 1 month after he gets out of CMC, he goes to visit his dad in Colorado and he rapes a girl, and she was broken down on the side of the road fixing a tire. He stopped and raped her. So 1 month out of prison, he rapes another girl.
He just wasn't going to stop.
No, they don't stop.
That's the thing about sexual predators. They don't stop.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a compulsion. They just can't stop.
Well, he's been getting away with it forever. He's an expert at it.
Okay, so he's at this men's colony prison in San Luis Obispo, and while he was there, he met...
He asked a buddy of his in Colorado if he'd be interested in kidnapping this girl he liked in Colorado and bringing her out to California.
And what did the guy say?
It just ends. The statement just ends.
So while he was in San Luis Obispo men's colony, he met Bittaker.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joe Jackson he met at a Tuscadero. So they get out at the same time. Do we know when Joe Jackson got out?
Roughly around the same time. But then they both end up back in CMC on the same block, too.
So now the 3 of them meet at San Luis Obispo State Prison.
Right, but it wasn't just the 3 of them. There was a couple more guys, too. They had like a group of sexual deviants.
Mm-hmm.
So when he met Bittaker and then they got out and Joe Jackson got out, so then the 3 of them were now stalking women together.
Correct.
Although Joe Jackson was never convicted of anything.
He was never charged. He did get arrested in Santa Monica with Norris, though, for having a rape kit and stalking, like peeping into windows with rape tools.
Yeah.
But they were let back out.
Now, did Bittaker say anything about him? I know you didn't talk that much with Norris, but did Bittaker say that Jackson was involved with their shenanigans, their killings?
Yeah, they both said that they never admitted that he was involved in any of the killings. I kind of always insinuated to Bittaker, like, I knew that he was because I had figured out the Knott's Berry Farm murder while he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
But he had said, he acknowledged that Jackson was with them a lot. And he was down at the beach, photographing the girls, going to, watching the girls come and go from work when they're stalking them. So he was actively, hunting with them.
But see, what I don't understand is how does he walk when he basically was an accessory to all these murders?
That's the $1 million question. And how does he say to Paul, they're going to say I'm involved in a Knott's Berry Farm murder, and then the recording just ends, and there's no investigation into the Knott's Berry Farm murder, and then there's all these jailhouse informants coming with information about this Knott's Berry Farm murder. But not only that, ATF goes to interview Bittaker at the county jail, and Bittaker even admits to the Knott's Berry Farm murder, and a third guy being there named Joe, and it's still not looked into.
Now, was he part of the prosecution's case? Did he help the prosecution?
I read, I forget, I actually think he testified. I want to say he was listed for the defense, actually, for Bittaker. I remember reading, when I read his testimony, though, there wasn't much in it. They did not question Jackson very long. It was just like, were you at CMC together? Did you hang out with them? Mm-hmm. It was very brief.
Do you know what his middle name is?
I have it probably in my files somewhere.
Is it Joe Anthony Jackson?
I would have to look. I have it in the police discovery.
I mean, it says that this guy, Joseph Anthony Jackson, was arrested in 2016.
Would he be 69 right now?
I tracked him down. When did I track him down? 2019, I tracked him down. And
he was out of prison at that point.
Yeah, if it is the same guy. I mean, it took me about 11 months to even track him down because it's such a common name, but I finally was able to.
Well, check your records and see if Joseph Anthony Jackson is him.
Yeah. Well, I sent you guys his number.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But is that him for sure?
Yeah. No, we've had many conversations.
Oh, you've already spoken to him.
Okay, so you have spoken to him, so this is not him then. He's not in jail.
Yeah, I've spoken to Joe. He will only, for some reason, he will only talk to me. He will not do, he didn't want to do the toolbox. He pretty much hung up when they called him. He wants nothing to do with this. And if he was involved a little bit more than he's saying, makes perfect sense. I think, honestly, with Bittaker, when they took Cindy up there and he's like, we got to kill her, because Norris is like, let's just let her go. And he's like, no, you're going to end up right back in prison. Bittaker, and look what he did with those teenagers too. Bittaker was such like a evil, like just sick, like the things he did is like, I almost think he set up Joe to be part of a murder. I think he probably told Joe it was just going to be a rape. They told him they were just going to grab this girl and rape her. And I think, Bittaker obviously always planned to kill these girls. They were never going to make it out alive. It says Norris killed her in the files for Knott's Berry Farm. But I think what happened was, she's dead. All of a sudden he's involved. Now he has a body. And then he meets Roy, and Roy is showing him the next 8 victims that they're going to take. And then all of a sudden Joe is going to the police. Like, I think he knew he was in way over his head. He was in something he didn't want to be into. He'd always been a rapist, but murder is a different story. And I think he panicked. And I think he just came up with this bullshit story that, Roy admitted to him about this. Mm-hmm. I don't know, because that initial interview, Paul Bynum stops the interview right when he says Knott's Berry Farm.
The mystery of the Knott's Berry Farm victim.
Yeah.
And how many conversations have you had with Joe Jackson?
Probably a dozen. I have asked him about Knott's Berry Farm.
But other things. I mean, what's your take on him?
Well, wait, what did he say about Knott's Berry Farm?
Well, he was like, I don't know. He's like, I've never been to Knott's Berry Farm with them. But then the woman who ran the license plate of that girl, Gretchen, I've spoken with her daughters, and she was like, that's total bullshit. Joe was always with them when they took us to Knott's Berry Farm. And that's multiple witnesses telling me, yes, Joe was with them, taking us to Knott's Berry Farm. So he was at Knott's Berry Farm with them. So obviously it's a lie. So I called Tom Cray, who is the lead investigator. This is Paul Bynum's partner. Mm-hmm. And he was off the day that Joe came forward, and Bynum, his partner, interviewed Jackson. And when I told him about Knott's Berry Farm, he's like, wait, what? He was like, what are you talking about? I was like, you don't know about Knott's Berry Farm? And I told him everything, and I sent him the doc. He's like, I have never seen these. Paul never told me about Knott's Berry Farm. And I said, Tom, listen, there's Knott's Berry Farm tickets found in evidence. They were found in Norris's closet. I see them on the evidence list. And he's like, you're right. And I was like, if there's a date on them, this could be the date of when they killed her. So he called Hermosa, because the evidence was housed at Hermosa. He was trying to get the evidence out for me to look at the date of those tickets and get this so I could continue on with the case, because he was like, oh my God, you're really onto something. But they had been transported over to the sheriff's department. So he's like, we don't have any jurisdiction to get them anymore. You have to go through the sheriff's department now.
We've been trying to get those through our contact with the sheriff's department. Haven't heard back from them yet.
So that's where we're left off.
Yeah.
So when everyone's saying, well, Bittaker was the lead on this, it doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like they were partners, hand in hand, that Norris was going to do this no matter what, whether Bittaker was there or not.
Oh, yeah. They were both just as sick. They both loved the torture. They loved that fear, on their victims' faces. They loved, just inflicting pain on their victims. They both were that sick. One wasn't worse. Bittaker, he gets painted as like the one who like led this little lamb to it, but no. I think you can see from this, this is Norris's writings, of things he did. It's a whole different picture of who he really is.
Decade of raping.
Yeah,
and strangling. And strangling before he even met Bittaker.
How many conversations did you have with Norris?
Oh gosh, hundreds, because it was over 5 years. It was after Bittaker gave up the bodies is when he freaked out. I think it was at the time I didn't realize, the stuff about, Cindy Schaefer. So I think he freaked out about when he found out that Bittaker had given me the placements of Cindy and Andrea. And I had sent him the placements that Bittaker showed me, and that freaked him out. I think because he knew that Bittaker had given me the correct locations. And then I had asked him I said, I know about that place up in the mountains, the unknown location that you never took, the search crew too, police too. And that's when he really knew that Bittaker had told me close to everything, because that location they had vowed to never reveal to anybody. So that was what really scared Norris. And then I told him, I'm going to write this into a book. And I'm going to go find Cindy and Andrea. And he's giving me the discovery. At the time, I had no idea I was going to stumble onto, all these other victims, all these other men, just like Knott's Berry Farm, Gretchen. There were Bittakers leasing cars. There was a piece of duct tape with red hairs on it, with hair clips, found in one of the cars he had just leased. That was taken into evidence. None of the victims have red hair. Whose red hair is that in his trunk with duct tape? I had no idea I was going to open Pandora's box when I opened that discovery.
Well, I'm sure Norris thought that he's going to get stuck for some more murders, and then even though they didn't have the death penalty at that time, where they weren't killing anybody or executing anybody,
exactly.
his sentence was going to change. Not that he think that he would ever get out. Did he ever think he was ever going to get out?
Oh, he did. And the reason he really freaked is he was up for parole in 6 months. So yeah, if I had, uncovered anything and brought anything to light, he was very scared because he thought he would get out on the parole for like medical release. He really thought he was going to get out. So this threatened, his chance at getting out. I mean, I don't think they were ever going to grant it, but
no.
In his mind, he really thought like this was all my fault.
Wow.
Yeah.
So knowing how dangerous these two men were, knowing how scary and dangerous they were, why do you think when you went into the cage with Bittaker the first time, he didn't attack you?
That's a great question because, Bittaker was so challenging and just degrading in the beginning, through the letters. And then I get in the cage and he is just like completely different. He was my first serial killer. I had my degree and I had done all these prison certifications, de-escalation training, restraint training, that kind of stuff. But nothing ever prepares you for when you're actually in a prison, especially a cage. I mean, with a serial killer, nothing can prepare you. And I don't know what it was. I just said this in a past episode. I paid attention to his word choice and saw the word he was using, mad, and started talking about Alice in Wonderland. And, I just said, let's sit down. Let's pretend we're in Wonderland. Tell me some stories, like kind of like suspending all boundaries and belief system type of thing. Like everything you say here is safe type of thing, like inviting him into like a safe spot. And then he sat down and it was, at the time I was like, should I even try this? This is kind of crazy. Should I even go this route? And something just told me to do it. And I did it and it really worked. I mean, he sat down and it was kind of like the perfect beginning and it started to warm him up. Just like that little, paying attention to a word choice that led to his favorite childhood book, that led to one little connection of a book that we both, really like. Sometimes it's very hard to find a connection or any commonalities with these guys. I struggle. So even a book or a TV show or anything, and paying attention to something, so subtle, like a word choice, they pick up on that. These guys are very intuitive. So when you're paying attention, when, they've been neglected their whole life, they pick up on that and they respond really well to it because they feel heard.
Which is what they wanted.
Right.
More than anything, based on the way that they killed these girls.
Yeah, and they're also hyper sensitive to everything because of the environment they're in, because everything's a threat.
Right.
So they've got eyes in the back of their head. They're watching people's body language. I mean, just in the short time that I was in the cage with you, just watching the other cages and the other inmates in there, and the way the guards are, or the correctional officers, I should say, are watching everything. I mean, it's like a chess match.
Oh, it is. You have to, like, every position, like you move your body, the way you look around, scan the room, you're always thinking an attack could come from any angle. And that's 24/7. You have to live like that in that environment, So they pick up on everything. So I think just me going in there and like kind of going in with a gentle approach and saying, let's sit down, have some lunch, kind of non-threatening. And I lowered my body because I saw like he was kind of like backing up and looking down. So I actually dropped some papers purposely and I bent down to pick them up to appear non-threatening to him, because I could tell from his body language I was appearing threatening when I got in the cage. So it's like you really have to pay attention to the body language in prison. It's vital. And, you got to learn prison movements too. You have to walk a certain way when you go into a prison.
Explain that.
If you don't have like a strong walk, because these predators, they pick up on a walk. And even Ted Bundy said it. He would actually watch girls by their walk. He could tell who was like prey just by their walk. So if you have a strong walk, I call it the predator walk or the prison walk, and people always tell me, they always comment on my walk. They ask me if I was military. I'm always asked, oh, were you in the army or something? And I'm like, no, it's prison. And like I always laugh, but it comes from there. It comes from 10 years being on San Quentin's death row. You have to like walk with a mission and a purpose. When you have a strong walk, they won't step to you. It's more intimidating. And predators, the first thing they notice is a walk.
Yeah. It's kind of how you have to walk in New York City. My dad told me that when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
When I'd go in there, we'd go in there for rock concerts. He goes, keep sunglasses on, walk with direction and strength, and don't make any eye contact with anybody. And if someone talks to you, you just ignore them and you just walk right past them.
You just walk like you're on a mission all the time. It's the first thing people notice, and it keeps people alive in prison. It really does.
Well, it's intimidating, so they don't know what you're going to do. Did you sit in the cage with Norris?
No. We only had phone. We talked on the phone a lot, actually. He would call every 2 days in the beginning. And, a lot of what he said was he would, a lot of blame shifting about Larry. But he would go into how sadistic and sick Larry was. And, I brought it up to him, too. Like, Norris, you're just as depraved as him. You were doing the same stuff. You could have told Bittaker to stop at any moment. You could have stopped all of this from even happening. You can't just blame shift onto Larry. And, Norris was like kind of all over the place too, because he would start to blame a lot of things on drugs. He tried to say that, Jackie and Leah, he was on LSD. And I said, you had them for 48 hours. LSD does not last 48 hours. And he had nothing to say back to that. I went to Bittaker and said, were you guys on LSD? He was like, no. And Bittaker says there was no drugs. We were smoking some grass. We were but pretty much sober when we were doing all of this.
So just the typical not taking any responsibility for what he had done.
Yeah, he's got to create that narrative in his head. When he's talking to other people, I'm sure he'll brag to other inmates on what he did, but, it's all the different audiences get different versions of the story.
He's the reason why there's everyone comes to me and they go, why is there so much misinformation on the internet about, Bittaker and Norris? And I've tracked it back because there's sources that say that they were in foster care system, they were sexually abused, some really crazy stuff. And I've checked every record. Neither one was ever in foster care, sexually abused, or anything of that nature. I tracked it back to Norris writing out to pen pals. He was writing out to pen pals. I think he was trying to get people to feel bad for Larry. Like if he gave him like a really dark childhood, maybe people would feel sorry for him. That's the only thing I can think of why he would do this, or maybe just to play games because he's a sadist.
Yeah.
But that is how all the misinformation ended up online, was Norris writing out to pen pals all this bullshit.
Do you have any recordings of the conversations with Norris?
No, I wish. I started recording right when I got pregnant, and that was just around the time I was just heading out to, the reason I had started was I was prepping for 2 months to go out to San Quentin for 6 or 8 weeks when I was pregnant. So I had started recording 2 months prior because I was doing the interviews by the phone every single day with them before my face-to-face with them.
Got it.
And during that time, because I was going out to San Quentin, I was only focused on Bittaker, taking his calls, and I was doing rounds with, Wayne Adam Ford and Douglas Clark at the time too. So I was focused on those 3 offenders for that period.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to dive into the Joe Jackson thing a little bit more, and then we should start talking about that. Maybe we should try to give him a call.
Mm-hmm.
See if he'll be willing to talk.
I mean, we haven't called him in a while, so we'll try again.
I can try him too. It's been a while since.
Let's try to do that. Okay, great. This was great, Laura. All right, friend.
All right.
Good job. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.